Hey scientists, it's Jessica Power, one of the science curriculum coordinators from Kansas City Public Schools. Scientists, the last couple weeks we talked about adaptations. The first 2 weeks ago, I did a demo for you where we looked at different tools that I had in my house with the tongs and the spoon and the tweezers and the toothpick. And we were wanting to see what kinds of foods and how much food could I pick up out of a plate full of Mike and Ike's unpopped popcorn, dried beans, and rice. I know, super exciting. But we found that bigger beaks were easier to pick up more food, and you could eat a bigger variety of foods. And then all the way down to the toothpick, I could only pick up a Mike and Ike, and that was by stabbing it. Otherwise, I couldn't get anything. Well, scientists, last week we read a book together about the birds of beaks to learn about how there's all these different kinds of birds across the world, really. And all those birds have different beaks that allow them to eat different kinds of foods. Well, I want to focus right now, scientists, on animals. We're going to talk about 3 topics today. We're going to talk about pollution, we're going to talk about forest fires, and then we're also going to talk about poaching or illegal hunting. Because believe it or not, scientists, there are thousands upon thousands of really cool animals on this world. There's all sorts of animals that we typically don't see here in Kansas City. Some of my favorites, like lemurs, live in Madagascar, which is its own country off the coast of Africa. And there's thousands of species of lemurs. But some of those lemurs are dying in populations for a lot of things. Their habitats are being cut down so that growers can make coffee plants to grow coffee beans. There are wildfires that are just taking over in different parts of the world. The Amazon rainforest, our largest rainforest in the world in Brazil, has been burning, and millions of acres have burned and have been destroyed. Now, there's all kinds of pollution going on. There's oil pollution or things that happen that get dumped into our oceans, into our rivers, into our lakes. There's also pollution like plastic bottles and those plastic little circles, or 6 of them that hold 6 cans together. Those get trapped and they get caught around different animals' necks. And then there's poaching or illegal hunting. And this is really common in Africa, especially on the savannah, where there's elephants and giraffes and really unique animals like lions. And what happens, scientists, is that people go in and they kill these animals as a prize, as game they call it. But what happens is that too many of these animals are dying, and they're not able to reproduce or have animal babies in a time to catch up and keep the population high for these animals. Now, I know, lions are dangerous, tigers are dangerous, but they're also beautiful and they're unique, and we need to be mindful of what we're doing in our ecosystems. So today, scientists, I want to talk about how things can happen that change an ecosystem. And when something happens that changes an ecosystem, what are those impacts? So again, we're going to focus on forest fires, we're going to focus on pollution, and we're going to focus on illegal hunting. So let's start with forest fires first and foremost. Scientists, I mentioned earlier that the Amazon rainforest has been burning, and millions, we're talking millions of acres of land have been completely destroyed. That doesn't even include the acres of land that are cut down daily to plant new plants or to build neighborhoods, things like that. We call that deforestation. But scientists, what happens? Let's talk about the forest fires, because there's been forest fires in California this year. There's been forest fires in Colorado, and they are devastating the environment, meaning that they are causing lots and lots of damage. It's really hard to stop and put out a forest fire. It takes a lot of people, and it's dangerous work. Now, we don't always think about the animals in the forest. Scientists, the forest is home for animals. Just like you have a home and I have a home. Maybe, my dog has a home. For wild animals, the environment they live in is their home. So think about deer or beavers or coyotes. They all have a home in the forest, or squirrels or different kinds of birds. And when the forest fires come and they burn down their forest, they burn down their home, well, now that those animals don't have anywhere to live. So you hear stories of places like in Oregon or in California where they've had forest fires, Colorado, where animals start to appear in neighborhoods, like deer just walking down the street. These animals are terrified because they've lost their homes. Now, when that happens during a forest fire, animals also die because they can't get out of the forest. So when things like a forest fire occur, that decreases populations within the forest. So animal populations drop down really low. That decreases the amount of natural resources like trees that we have. And scientists, that takes lots and lots of time, hundreds of years, to get that forest back to how it was. Now let's talk about pollution. And specifically, I'm thinking water pollution. So with our oceans, our lakes, and our rivers. Believe it or not, scientists, the world's largest coral reef is in Australia. It's on the coast of Australia. And we are talking about thousands of different kinds of corals, different kinds of tropical fish, a really beautiful environment. But unfortunately, due to human pollution, with oil and different chemicals being dropped into the oceans, with plastic and things that don't break down, right? Pollution, garbage being thrown into the ocean, our lakes and our rivers, we start to get what's called bleaching. And what happens is the corals that are usually brightly colored, think like really bright, beautiful colors, they slowly start to fade because they're not getting the right nutrients that they need. Corals are living organisms. They're a living thing. And so just like you and just like me, we need nutrients, we need energy, we need things to grow and survive, and corals need that too. But when you dump in pollution or you dump in fumes from boats, right, those toxic fumes that boats can put off into the water, that slowly starts to destroy and break down the coral reef. There's a decline in sea turtles right now because sea turtles they're getting caught in pieces of plastic and they choke and they're not able to survive. A long time ago, well, relatively a long time ago, there was this huge oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, down in Louisiana, Texas, Florida area. And an oil company, there was a pipe that had ruptured, it had broken, and it was releasing all kinds of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. Thousands upon thousands of fish died because they can't drink oil, right? And now we talk about how do populations or how are ecosystems impacted because of these changes. Well, one of those things with the oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico is there were fishermen that lost their jobs because there weren't enough fish to fish, right? So you look at some of these things that happen to our ecosystems, right, our natural world, and they cause huge problems for even us humans. So not only did the fish population go down in the Gulf of Mexico, people lost their jobs. They weren't able to fish because there were no fish. And that's not an easy thing to clean up in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico, a bunch of oil that spilled. And it took a really, really long time to get it cleaned up. And the Gulf of Mexico is still coming back from that oil spill. Now, scientists, the last thing I wanted to talk to you today about things that happen to ecosystems is poaching or illegal hunting, like I had mentioned earlier. Poaching is really common in Africa on the savanna, where you have zebras and lions, you have gazelle, you have giraffes, you have elephants. Scientists, the rate at which elephants are being illegally hunted or poached is at a rate where if we can't get it under control and stop elephants from being poached, those African elephants may go extinct during your lifetime and during mine. Now, when you poach elephants, let's just keep with the elephants. Elephants are one of the biggest spreaders of different plant seeds. So elephants are responsible for dropping seeds in their droppings, and then that grows new plants. right? And then you have herbivores like zebras and gazelle that eat those plants, right? And then you have organisms, or you've got lions, right, that eat the zebras. We know that circle of life with ecosystems. If there's not enough elephants, then there's not enough plants, because we're not dispersing the seeds and growing plants. And there's not enough plants, there's not enough food for our herbivores. If there's not enough food for our herbivores, they begin to die off. And if the herbivores start to die off, then the carnivores also suffer, because then there's not enough food for the carnivores. So scientists, there are environmental changes that happen all of the time. And some of those changes are positive. You see all sorts of places where they're planting trees, or there's conservation farms where they're protecting, like African elephants in Africa. There's conservation reservations where they're literally protecting and breeding animals to get the population up. And that's to help save our planet, and that's to keep the ecosystems in balance. Scientists, at the very beginning of this video, I talked to you about lemurs. I said lemurs are one of my favorite animals. And there's tons and tons of species of lemurs. But some of those lemurs are critically endangered because their habitats are being lost due to people cutting them down because of things like forest fires. So as we are scientists in this country, we need to care about the environment. We need to care about the world. We need to understand that poaching is really, really bad. You're not taking a trophy home, you're killing an animal. And that animal has a really important job in its ecosystem. And when forest fires rip through different parts of our country and around the world, the impact that can make to the devastation of the animals, the loss of home, the loss of resources, the loss of food for surviving animals. And finally, with pollution, if we can recycle, let's recycle. So that way we don't have plastic bottles and different pieces, plastic bags and different things being put into the ocean and the rivers and the lakes. That's going to hurt our animals and decrease the population. Now, scientists, things happen in ecosystems, and we understand that. But there's lots of things that we can do as humans, as people, to protect those ecosystems. So yes, scientists, some of the coolest animals in the world are cool because of their adaptations that we talked about the last couple weeks. But if we want to keep those really cool animals around and allow them to be able to live with their adaptations and their ecosystems, we have to protect those environments. So be thinking about that, scientists, as you see things in the news. Pay attention to the world. We'll be back here next week. We're actually going to start talking about earth science. We're going to be talking about weathering and erosion and how landforms change. I'll see you next week, scientists. Have a great day.